Hello there. In this video I'm going to show you how you can use Fluid Designer to create your own pattern and actually save the file on the file system. So what we're going to do is to show you how you can set up modifiers similar to the files that are already in your system. So if you start Fluid Designer up, so what I'm saying is if you actually scroll down the screen, these objects here, all of these objects in the viewed at the moment, not the white ones, all of these other objects here, so if we take Celtic Knot for example, if we drag and drop that onto the workspace, that's got some modifiers created for you which enable you to quickly and easily generate other patterns. So in this video I'm going to show you how you can actually do that yourself. Okay, so that one's Celtic Knot Pendant 3-leaf. I'll just go to File and New because we don't want to write on top of anything we've already got. If we just move that out of the way there, if we just go to File and Append and just go to the Groups folder, and go to Pendants, and the one that I just opened there was Celtic Knot 3-leaf. So if we just go to the object folder there, and if I just press the A key on the keyboard, that will highlight all of those objects, and if I just deselect, I just held down the Shift key there and deselected the Celtic Knot Pendant 3-leaf, but I've got all the other objects associated with this. If I just append them from the library, they will all appear in my outliner window now, and they're all currently highlighted. So there's the angular rotation, and here are some cross sections. Now these are all switched off out of view, so I'll just switch a few of them on. Okay, you don't need to change those, you don't need to switch them in view, you can keep those hidden. I just tend to keep the angular rotation one in view and selected in case you want to change it. So what are we going to do? Well, first of all I'm going to open up the toolbox panel and just pull this up, and I'll open up the properties panel as well. And I'm going to create a basic pattern now, and I'm going to do that by going to Add Curve, and I'm going to use Curves Galore. Lots of patterns that you can create in Curves Galore. I'm just going to create a very simple one, which is probably already on your system anyway, and I'm going to select Flower. Now at the moment the output curve type is a poly. We want a NURBS, and we want a 3D one. Now this object at the moment is only 2 millimeters approximately, just under 2 millimeters across. That's too small for us, so we need to change some of these values here. Now I'm first of all going to change the number of petals down to 4, and let's reduce the petal width slightly, maybe 1.5, something like that, and we need to increase the outer radius here now, so I'm going to drag that up. And I think, yeah, I'm going to go for about 8 millimeters up here approximately. So I'm actually going to type in 5 there as the outer radius. So you can see we've got an object that's 8.5 millimeters now. And if you just hold down the center mouse button and just rock the mouse so that you can see the grid, that gives you an idea of how big this object is, given that the grid itself is 21, I think it's 21 millimeters across. So that just gives you a rough idea of what size this is. And if you look at all the ones that are on your system, you'll see that the similar objects are this sort of size. So I'm not going to make any more changes now to these values over here. So I can hide the toolbox by just pressing the T key on the keyboard. The T on the keyboard will hide that. So if I just go to View and Top View, so there's my default object. and it's a flower, as we can see in the outliner window. And because it's a curve, we can actually click on show the curve data information, and we can apply a thickness to this, and I'm going to apply a pendant thickness cross-section diameter rounded of 1 millimeter. Okay, so that sets up the basic pattern of this flower, 4-leaf flower. Well, if I actually go back to show the main information icon, it already says it's a flower. I could actually add in 4-leaf and change the name of it, and you'll see that appears in the bottom of the panel here. That's actually quite useful because if later on you want to append what you've created here to another file, when you go to File and Append, I'll just do it for you. If you go to File and Append, the name that appears here, this one, remember we've just imported these objects from Celtic Knot, the Celtic Knot Pendant 3-leaf 001 that appears there actually came from this name here, as well as it being the file name. So it is quite important to actually name that object for future use, future reference. Now, to create patterns out of this particular object, what we do is we create some modifiers. And the modifiers that we're going to use are an array modifier. And you can see that when I select the array modifier there, what we get is an increased count replicates the objects. And if I adjust the relative offset here, this is in the X direction, the red arrow is the X direction, this is the X axis. I can adjust my relative offset there and change my pattern. Now, these 4 objects here are actually 4 columns. That's one object, that's 2 objects, but by placing them next to each other we can consider these to be columns. So I like to use the name set the columns as the label here for what was an array, well, what is an array modifier. So when this is hidden, I can see that this array modifier says set the columns instead of just the normal word array. So I change that to set the columns, and you'll see that throughout all the files that are on your system. So we could set that, for example, at 3. Now if we wanted to create a circular array, we need to use this angular rotation, this object here, which is something called an empty, and that's created, we've imported that, appended it from the Celtic Knot file, but it can be added by going to Add Empty and Plane Axis. That will recreate this object here. But the one that we've appended has a value associated with it. If we go to the Properties panel and go to the Show the Main Information icon, the Z angle of this object is 60, and if I just zoom in there, so if I change this, if I type in 30, you'll see that this empty rotates. If I set it back to 0, you'll see that it's positioned there in line with the axes. So but what's more important, not what you can actually see in terms of this empty, that's not really of much importance. What's important are the values here. In a complete circle we have 360 degrees. So in terms of creating symmetrical objects, it's important what value you enter here. 6 times 60 will give you 360 degrees. So in other words, we should be able to create 6 copies of this original pattern to create one complete circle here, if Z is 60. And if I go back to the flower 4-leaf object, our initial curve, and if I just view it from the top again, and go to the modifiers, so if we want to create a circular pattern here, I need to tick Object Offset, and I need to select the object that I'm going to use, and that's this angular rotation empty. And notice we've got 3 copies of it, and they're starting to rotate now. But if I increase the count up to 4, 5 and 6, you'll see that I get my complete circle there. Now what you've got to be very careful of when using this particular object, angular rotation, is excuse me, if you go to 7 and 8, nothing appears to happen. But actually what you're doing is you're creating another copy on top of these 2. You've got 6 to start with, the 7th will go around here, the 8th will go around here, and you will have real problems with NetFab Basic if you try to do that. So you must always be very careful that you just fill in the last one, that you don't go any further. Now here we've got 6. If we go back to angular rotation, and notice that the name of it here is angular rotation. If you actually go to add and create an empty yourself, it will say the word empty here. You will have to type in angular rotation. So that's just something to note. If we decide to change the Z value, what's important, as I said a few minutes ago, is that this should be multiples of 360 degrees. So you should either have 360 here, in which case, let me go back to my flower again. Yeah, in which case you get that pattern. If we change this to 180, notice you get that pattern. If we change it to 90, now here's where we can really see what's going on. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 copies of the flower, but note here we've got a count of 6. When we move it down to 4, nothing changes. It's only when we go down to 3. So as I've just said previously, you've got to be very careful that you don't put a pattern on top of the original. So if I go to 5 or 6, I'm putting a pattern on top of a pattern. That will cause 3D printing problems. So you can see what a count of 4 with an angular rotation of 90 degrees does. So 360, 180, 120 is okay actually, because that will give you 3 copies. But remember, we've got it set at 4, so the 4th copy we need to remove it. Okay, so that's how angular rotation works. 360, 180, 120, 90, 72, 60 and 45 and 30 degrees are the values that you could use there to get a nice symmetrical pattern. Other values you won't get symmetry. If you're not interested in symmetry, you can put any value in here. I'll switch it back to 60, and I'll change this back to 6. So that's set the columns. Now if I just switch that back down to 3, if I remove that tick from there, my angular rotation object isn't working at all anymore. We've just got a single relative offset of 0.7 going in the x-axis direction in the columns. We're getting 3 columns. We could add another modifier here, another array modifier, and notice it just puts another 3 to the right of the existing 3. Well, that's not what I want. I want to actually create some up here. So what I need to do is to remove this value here, set this value, sorry, at 0, and I want to go upwards this time. Well, the red arrow is the x-axis, the green arrow is the y-axis, so if I change this value here, you can see that I can offset it in the vertical direction. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a second row of these objects, and a third row, and a fourth row. So I like to change the name in here to set the rows, so that when these are shut down, you can easily see what these modifiers are. So rather than keep them with the name array there, try changing these. So I'll just I'll switch that down to 2 and I can close this panel down here, and the way I can get a nice clean image in my browser window all the time is that when I've got the finished object that I want, if I press the home key on the keyboard, it positions my current object centrally in the screen, and that looks quite nice in the browser window because everything looks the same there. So try and use the home button on your keyboard. Don't have your pattern looking like that and save it, because that's the view you'll get in the browser window. If you press the home key on the keyboard, it'll fill the workspace and it'll look good in the browser panel. So we don't want to export this as an OBJ file. In this instance, quite unusual for working with Fluid Designer for 3D printing, in this instance we want to actually go to File and Save, because we're going to save this as a Blender file. And I'm doing Pendants, and so I'm in Pendants at the moment, so I need to give it a name. So I'm just going to call it My Flower Pendant. And I'm just going to actually at the beginning of that put AAA, so that we can, well no, I'll leave it as My Flower Pendant. Now typically I would put 001 and master at the end of that. I'm going to delete this from my system later, so I'm not going to bother doing that. But you'll notice that all the others that I've created, I use the word master to highlight the fact that it is a Blender file and that it shouldn't be saved, or which would in effect change it, modify it. So these are basically like template files. So if we save that as a Blender file now, My Flower Pendant, and if we go to File and New, and if we scroll down the Pendant browser panel, need to go down quite a way because we're at letter M. So okay, yeah. So if we go down to M, this is what I've just created, and you'll see. You'll see that the image is displayed at a reasonably good size, centered on the icon there, like all of the others. So that's what the home button did. And if you now just drag and drop that object onto the workspace, you can change the count for the columns, you can tick the rotation one, and you can change the count for the rows. So to complete the rotation, you need to go up to 6. And remember here, you're going to create a 3D printable file. So we don't go to File and Save As now, as is normal in Fluid Designer for 3D printing. We go to File and Export, and export that as a wavefront object to the desktop, and I'll leave it as My Flower Pendant. So that's how you can actually create one of the default files that exists in Fluid Designer for 3D printing, if you decide you want to create your own pattern. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you.